It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Folks, it's an honor today that I have Milton Bartley, and Milton Bartley is the CEO of ImageQuest LLC, an IT services and security firm based in Nashville, Tennessee. Those of you that are new to the platform that haven't seen Milton on the show before, let me just give you a little bit of history. But I worked with Milton back about 10 years ago from 2014 to 2016. Milton had a copier business. He also had an IT business. It was one business. Milton really wanted to focus on the IT stuff. I came in to help him kind of get that print stuff in a place where he could make a better decision as to what to do with it. His decision was to sell the print business. I left the company in 2016, and Milton built a phenomenal IT services business, and he recently sold it, and that's what we're going to talk about. But Milton, before we even get into the big success story, you selling the business, the entrepreneurial dream, let me just ask you a question. When I was there in 2016, if the decision was we're going to keep that print business and grow that thing, would you have sold your company to the same people? And do you think you would have got the same return?
Wow. Well, very good question, Ray. And first, thank you for having me on the show. I always love being on the end of the day with Ray. It's always fun to share stories with you and talk to your audience. So, but the simple answer is, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think we had 6 suitors that we talked to. 3 that we were serious with before we signed the letter of intent. And I don't know that any of those 6 would have wanted a print business, Ray. I think any of those 6 would have probably asked us to divest that in another way, either as part of the transaction or before the transaction.
Well, I remember that when we were really looking at that, because we're like, okay, what do we do with this print business? We were thinking at one point maybe we could just vendor manage out the service and still control the contract from birth to death in print, along with the IT. But then when we really peeled the onion back, it was 1.2% of our technology spend in the customers that were doing full board IT with us. So the print piece was about 1.2%, and I started screaming, it's only 1.2%, people. A lot of people gave me a bunch of crap. Oh, you're crazy, Ray, that's not true. Of course, today everybody's saying it's 1.2%, so we were way ahead of the game on that. But when you think
we were
about
ahead of the
that,
game on a lot of things, Ray.
I mean, when you think about that, so I think you made the right decision. But let's talk about this. So you built this company. You had it for about 20 years, right?
Yeah, 18 years, actually.
18 years, wow. So you looked at a bunch of different suitors. I know you ended up selling to Evergreen. We saw the big publication on that. Evergreen has an IT investment group called Lyra Technologies, and I believe there's 100 MSPs in that group. Is that correct?
I believe they just closed on their 100th or are closing on their 100th MSP. That's correct.
So let me ask you a question now that you're in the family. Do any of those 100 MSPs sell print?
Great question. I don't purport to know all 100 CEOs, although I did get a chance in May to spend time with about 80 of them, just the way timing worked out in Austin, Texas for a couple of days. But no, I'm not aware of any of them, Ray, that are in the print business.
Well, folks, I want you to pay attention to the conversation that me and Milton have, especially if you're one of my friends that self-supplied service print equipment. You're making this investment to diversify into the IT services space. You really need to think about this. Milton's not going to tell you no. I'm not going to tell you shouldn't do it. You should do whatever you think you should do as long as you got a business model and it makes sense. But what you shouldn't do is use your print money to pay for the IT services diversification. Because if you do have to separate them, and you probably will if you want to have a nice exit strategy, you can't separate an IT business that's been being funded by a print business. Nobody will want to buy it. So Milton, let's talk about the suitors that you had and then why you chose Evergreen, and let's just have a conversation on the sale of ImageQuest LLC. And by the way, congratulations.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, we started this company in 2007. Of course, you joined us 7 years later in 2014, helped me get the print house in order, helped me really, I'm going to say, standardize our operations and clean it up and get it ready to sell. And then we sold that, as you mentioned, in 2016, which really kind of cleared the decks for us. So thank you for that, Ray. So April 2016, RJ Young bought that from us. And that cleared the decks for us to really double down on our IT services business, add a compliance as a service at the time, now advisory services business, which is now, a thriving multi-million-dollar business of its own inside of ImageQuest. But back up about a year ago, the original investors decided that they had, at 16 and a half, 17 years in, were ready for an exit. We're ready to kind of take some of the risk off the table, as they say. There's all kinds of euphemisms for it. So we started looking around, and as all IT companies and probably a lot of print companies, we get hit often by potential buyers, private equity generally, or private equity backed. And we had those calls and emails and texts over the years, but we had built a few relationships along the way. So Evergreen being one of those, I've known them since 2018 and just kept a relationship going with them. Some others came. I won't name the other companies. I don't think that's fair, but there were other strong opportunities there, and good people we got to know along. I went and visited some of them in their hometowns, spent some time with them, broke bread with them, got to know them. But at the end of the day, Ray, pun there.
Yeah, there you go.
At the end of the day, Ray, I had three options. Option one is, do we sell to somebody who is going to absorb ImageQuest, and within 90 to 120 days, the ImageQuest name and brand are gone. Our customers are being serviced by a company with a new name. That's option one, and that's not a bad option, but that's an option. Option two is we were big enough at approaching 20 million in revenue that private equity companies were willing to platform us and make us the platform company, and then let me spend 5 years going around the country finding tuck-ins and plug-ins under the ImageQuest umbrella. And so that was an option to me. And I had a couple of folks that we had talked to seriously about that. And then the third option was really a less traditional private equity, but a buy and hold. And that's where Evergreen fits, where essentially their goal is to buy these cash flowing companies like ImageQuest and hold on to them forever. Whatever forever means, you can determine that. Sure. But it's not a 3 to 5 year, soak all the cost out of it, grow the EBITDA number, and then sell it. So at the end of the day, that's where we ended up. Evergreen rose to the top of that list for us. And in January, we signed an LOI and we went through due diligence and we closed on May the 1st. So very, very excited to tell that story.
Well, let me ask you a question. So you chose Evergreen, and obviously the the price was important. I don't think you would have sold for less money to do something you really didn't want to do. Evergreen was the model that you wanted. And just a quick, what was the difference with what Evergreen was going to buy you for? I know you're not going to tell me what they bought you for, but I could tell by the smile on your face it was probably a good deal. But what was the difference in what they bought you for to maybe the next best price in those other models?
Yeah, great question. And I'll answer it a little bit politically savvy because we're not going to talk numbers. But I will just say that they were well, that's not true. They were one of the only two companies that were ready to offer full price at close and not try to convince me about the second bite of the apple, which is so often talked about in these exits. And that's not, again, I'm not disparaging other people's models. I'm just saying for us and for our investment partners, and particularly the way our operating agreement was written and the way I had sweat equity baked into the exit of that operating company, that wouldn't work for us. What worked for us was having all of our money up front, not being worried about some second bite when the company gets flipped. And again, from a buy and hold perspective, that's not what Evergreen is selling, right? Sure. So, the delta between number one and number two was not insignificant, but most of that significance came in the deal structure more so than the actual dollar amount.
Well, if you basically your deal was a cash deal to you, so you probably have some agreement, but I think you could probably leave anytime in the next couple of years or whatever it is. But I'm thinking if they were going to buy you for cash for a pretty good multiple is what I'm guessing, what did you do over the last few years to make sure that you don't have to be there? Because they're not going to buy a company that's solely dependent on you. There's no way they would have given you all cash up front and said, here you go to the beach, Milton, and good luck.
No, that's great, Ray. And so I think we talked about a year ago, we decided to start seriously considering an exit for lots of reasons. I've already gone into what one of those main reasons was. Secondarily, though, a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, frankly, I woke up one morning and all of a sudden we're running a $13 million IT company. And I'm like, holy moly, you've all heard the cliche or read the book, what got you here won't get you there. And so we went through those same pains. Ray, you were part of it. When we hit 5 million, we realized, hey, we're going to have to make some decisions to get to 10. When we got to 10, we had to make some decisions to get to the next level. And so I started looking around and said, okay, well, not what do I want to build ImageQuest to be to get to 15 million or 20 million, but what do I want to build ImageQuest to get to 20 million? And one of those big decisions I needed to make was I needed an operational leader. And so I went out and found an operational leader, and I found someone in Matthew Turner who had done this before for IBM, very, very large MSP practice that he ran for them. And then he went to work for a, much larger than us, but much smaller than IBM, $75 million MSP, and helped grow that to, I believe, over 400 million. I might be slightly off, but big. Mm-hmm. Helped them take an exit and was looking for his next challenge. And so he came to ImageQuest when I think we were approaching 14 million by the time I got him on board, maybe a little smaller than that. And anyway, helped set us up for success. He came in and immediately, when I say immediately, Ray, within a week of him being on board, I was no longer needed in operational meetings. I was no longer needed to make decisions around technology stack and how we're going to architect a customer's agreement and how we're going to staff the service desk, and just things that I had worked on since 2007, 8, 9, 10, and been the loudest voice in the room, right or wrong. Suddenly I didn't even need to be in the room, and that was refreshing. And so at the same time, I brought Sammy Jo, who's been with me for 6 years, but she had at that point had been with me for 4 years, and I elevated her to a director role and put her in charge of the advisory services group. So if you think of ImageQuest with 2 operating entities inside, I really now had 2 leaders, Matthew running IT, Sammy Jo running advisory, and me really being the true CEO, staying out of their way to the extent possible, dealing with customers, and being a sounding board for them, but not running the company. So to answer your question, fast forward to last year, we start talking to these suitors, Evergreen and others, and they can see relatively quickly that, hey, we talk to a lot of MSPs, right? And a lot of MSPs are defined by the CEO. The CEO wears a lot of hats, and I did as we were growing. But we were at a scale and scope that they realized that ImageQuest ran whether Milton was there or not. I'm important, I get that, and they want me as part of the team. But if I were to walk out of here today and for some reason never come back, ImageQuest will continue, and it will continue really without missing much of a beat.
No, that's great. And I'm sure that this executive that you brought in, there's nothing that he ran into since he was there that he didn't already do, dealing with a $400 million company. So, and by the way, right. If you do the math on the tenure that he was there, he helped you build that thing pretty quickly, generating more than a few $1 million.
Well, yeah, revenue. Absolutely. So if you look at last year, I think the Inc. list is going to come out later this month. We know we're on it. So the Inc. 5000 list, we made it for the last 4 years. And so to put that in perspective, I'm not saying that to brag, but I mean, to hit it once is great. But to hit it once, you can have a magical year and do it. But to sustain that 4 years in a row really says something about our growth trajectory. But to put a capper on it, last year, we grew top line at 43% and we grew bottom line over 100%. And yeah, I mean, Matthew was a critical part of that success. His standards and controls and processes that he's brought to this team help set us up to be able to have that kind of growth and to not only just have it once, but to sustain it.
Well, I remember, when you were bringing Matthew on, because that was a big investment for the company. You're telling me about it, man. It's a big investment.
Yep.
And, when you think about what you just said there, if he helped you, double that bottom line impact was probably because of him and the other human capital that you've been putting in the bus, because you were not afraid to invest in human capital, which definitely will drive down the EBITDA. And a lot of folks don't do that. And you need to do that, especially if you're planning on some kind of an exit. So that's a great story. Milton, let me ask you a question. $20 million business, how much of that revenue is reoccurring versus, it's just transactional sales?
Yeah, good question. I think we just closed July. Do some quick math, 14.5 million run rate of reoccurring revenue. Annual recurring revenue, 14.5.
Wow. So strong contracts.
75-ish percent. 70 to 75%.
Okay.
I think if I just did my math right.
That's great. And then how many customers represent your whole business? Like that are
well, see now this is where we start to separate ImageQuest from the others. I see your smile. You knew the question was loaded. We have 94 recurring revenue customers. Wow. So very, very much smaller number than most of our counterparts that would be our size. We are deep and wide with our clients. We work largely in regulated space. We work with a lot of banks, financial institutions of all types, trust companies, wealth management, registered investment advisors, large healthcare. We have others as well, but our staple are those, and we are deep and wide with those clients. So again, it's a $20 million plus run rate business, and we're doing it with less than 100 customers.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I would bet you that your customers put a lot of percentage of the pie in the intellect at ImageQuest. In other words, they can get IT services from anybody. I mean, it's a lot of IT services becoming a commodity at this point. It's in that compliance, it's in that security services, it's in making sure that the company is preparing themselves for the technology they need to not only grow their own company. I mean, everybody's looking at technology. So those firms that have the ability to really deliver that intellect are obviously going to get the higher price. And I've been beating on my friends that you have to move upstream, run around chasing $2,000 contracts is ridiculous. I can remember back in 2015 time frame with Paul Dipple. We were in the Paul Dipple group, and we're like, okay, we got to be selling these assessments. And we went out there, we started selling assessments. We came up with a formula. I think we both came up with this eating dinner one night. Hey, let's just do a minimum of $2,500, and that's for 25 users. That's $100 a knowledge worker, and if they got 50, it's 5,000. That was a long damn time ago. That was a lot of immaturity ago, if you will. So you're still a fee-based assessment company. I'm not going to go to your website and get a free assessment, am I?
You are not.
Okay, thank God. See, my friends, people do make money selling assessments, and then when they build their company up to exit, they do pretty good. Milton, I was just thinking, I don't know what you got for your company, but you know me, I like to play with math. But I know the multiple in the print business is about 2.5 to 3 times earnings. A lot of these folks are running between probably an 8 and 10% EBITDA, and they would have to be probably a $150 million print services company to probably get what you got for a $20 million IT services company. So I think you made the right damn decision, exiting from the print. And I'm convinced that if the decision was made to keep the print, it would have always been a separate company. It would have never been part of the IT.
I think you're right, Ray, especially looking backwards through the lens. I mean, we laugh, but one of the happiest days of my life was still April the 29th of 2016, and it was watching the 2 RJ Young trucks drive away from our loading dock with all of our inventory in it. And I knew that the check was already in the bank. That was a happy day. But I just think the print business is a great business. I grew up in it. You grew up in it. My first, as my wife would say, my first real job was selling copy machines or selling office equipment in the 1990s. But I feel like we exited it at the right time, and I leveraged that exit as an opportunity to really double down and invest in what today is the fastest growing piece of our business, which is our advisory services business. I wouldn't have that business today if we had not exited the print business, most likely.
Well, I just think, it was a very small, I mean, to put it in perspective, the print business that ImageQuest had was pretty damn small. I mean, it's a $1.5 million business, whatever it was. But it doesn't mean, we could have easily grown that to 10 million if we wanted to. It's real easy to do, right? So, but the decision was we'd rather focus more on that IT space, so that was the right decision. But when I think about some of my friends out there, if this print business is supporting the IT cost, that's the problem. And I will say that while we did have the print business, there was probably a lot of that common synergies we were passing back and forth. But once we got rid of it, it was really on its own at that point. There was no borrowing the money from the annuity coming in on print to pay the bills for the IT, and you had to look at the P&L a whole lot different. And I just think a lot of times people are building IT companies inside the print channel as a hobby. And a hobby is something that doesn't have profit usually. That's the difference between a business and a hobby. And a hobby is usually unmanaged because it's a freaking hobby. And so, and I think when you managed it well. Is there anything that, I want to ask you this question. So ImageQuest never once bought another IT services company. And I remember there's been times when we talked a little bit about it and you said there's one in the marketplace and, you never did it. Why is that? Because I believe you should never buy an IT services company, in my opinion. They can't have the same profile and all that as you. But why did you decide to go organic when we see so many folks out there just buying up their neighbors?
It's a great question, Ray. And so, we did kick the tires. We did wine and dine a few over the years. But ultimately, and we got close once, I think we didn't have the LOI, but we were going to sign it. And that morning I literally backed out. And I'm glad I did. Mm-hmm. So I will just say the reason we didn't do it at the end of the day for me is just what you said. We do it a certain way at ImageQuest. That doesn't mean it's the only way. It doesn't mean it's the only right way. We get that. There's a lot of ways to do this. But Paul Dipple told me in 2014, and he beat me over the head until I finally listened to him, that, hey, there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of client types you can serve and be successful, but you can't serve all client types and be successful. You have to pick a lane. And so once we pick that lane, and as I said earlier, fewer than 100 customers, going after regulated businesses, fairly tightly defined of what we're looking for, I'm not going to find another IT company that looks like that to buy. So if I buy somebody, I'm either going to have to decide that, hey, we're going to change our target client profile to match what I just bought, or some high percentage of what I just acquired doesn't really fit us and I don't want it, right? So I'm going to be shedding it fairly quickly. So either way, when I looked at it, it wasn't a winning situation. I said, hey, we're going to take all that time, energy, and effort and those capital dollars, and I will use those to just expand organically. And that's what we chose to do, and it certainly paid off for us.
I just think it's the right way to do it. I mean, the problem is in the print sector, you could go buy another print company. It's the same damn business you got. There's nothing different about it. You know, they got a machine that's got a button that says start and one that says stop, and they put prints on paper and you sell them toner and service it. I mean, everybody does it the same. You just might be able to do it at a better cost. But there's nothing different about those businesses. The customers are everybody. You can sell to everybody. It's a print machine. And they take that mentality and they try to go buy an IT services company, and this person's running around selling $1,000 a month contracts. This other company's over there where they're selling a fee-based assessment. The other guy's got free assessments on his website. It's just nonsense. And they try to scale that, and I don't think you could scale it, number one. You know, I do think that there's a place for some really big mega dealers where they could sell a lot of compute products. They could sell, you know, they got thousands of customers. They could go out and sell a whole bunch of computers to a school district, whatever you want to do, and make a little bit of margin on it. Who gives a crap? But when you look at the customers that you want to do the IT service and support for, the security services for, those have to be customers that are willing to pay for those services. And the only way you're going to make any money to bring in the right human capital to support those customers is you've got to move upstream. I mean, I don't think you could do it any other way. And
I completely agree. I mean, that's what you talked about our floor. You know, back in the day, that floor has increased over the years, and you know, there's a cost for us to provide the services we're going to provide, no matter how large or small you are. There's a baseline cost, and we just can't provide the ImageQuest way for less than that floor cost. It just is what it is. So knowing that, why would you go after those small customers that aren't going to be able to afford that floor anyway?
No, and why would you pay another IT company 5 or 8 or 9 times EBITDA to bring him in? That money you could easily go out and get the right help to help you. And a lot of these folks, sadly, are doing this on a whim, or they're taught. You know, one of the flaws I always saw in the industry, and now that you've been in it a long time, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong or crazy. But I think a lot of the consultants in the IT services space, when they come into the print space, they're used to dealing with really small lifestyle companies. That most IT companies are $3-5 million, and they're coming into these copier businesses that are $20 or $30 million, and they're trying to teach them how to build a $3 million IT company. Because if they really wanted to help them build a 50 or a 25 or whatever where you're going, they would know, well, you got to go upstream. You got to be able to sell assessments. You got to be able to do all these things. But I think they try to fit everybody in what they're comfortable with. 90% of their customers are being lifestyle businesses under $5 million.
No, Ray, this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it's fresh in my mind. I was at a client site. Well, no, that's not true. I was at a meeting this morning at a friend's company. And they're not a client. I misspoke. They are a manufacturing company. Doesn't really matter. But in that meeting where we were all getting a tour of their manufacturing facility, we were looking at their amazing infrastructure that runs all of their manufacturing equipment. It was just unbelievable, this place. And we started talking about the infrastructure, and Michael turned around and looked at us. He said, hey, he goes, you know, at the end of the day, the infrastructure is easy. He said, it's the integration that we need the help with, that we need to bring in the experts for. And that resonated with me. We weren't there to talk about ImageQuest IT or anybody's IT. We were getting a tour of this manufacturing facility. But the infrastructure is easy, and that resonated, because I think that's largely true. And we see MITS, you know, managed IT services folks we're being put in a commodity box in some respects, Ray, and the infrastructure is a commodity. I will admit that. which is why we're so successful with our regulated clients, because we learn those clients so well. We know how our clients operate sometimes better than they do. And that's really allowed us to sell, to your point, we're selling our intellect. The infrastructure is easy.
Yep.
It doesn't mean it's simple sometimes, but it's easy. But it's the understanding of the operations and the data and how all those pieces and parts come together and work with each other that really is where we shine with our clients.
And I think the sad part is a lot of folks are giving away the intellect to get the freaking infrastructure. And it's just absurd. I'm looking at some of the financials of some of our big OEM friends in their IT business, and you think, what are you doing? How could your profit be this low? And I really believe a lot of folks, and I'm sure some of our copier friends are doing the same thing. They're giving away their intellect so they could sell some infrastructure, and that's just nuts, and it's never going to get you upstream. Milton, it's just such a great honor to talk to you, and to watch ImageQuest evolve where it's evolved to over these many years, and I can't wait to keep in touch with you. As you're probably on the beach, I'm going to have to come and go fishing with you sometime. But, is there anything you want to add or share a little bit of wisdom to our friends, especially those friends of ours that are doing the print with the IT? Just a couple little things that they should not be doing. And go ahead and tell them you should not be doing this.
Yeah, well, I won't be so cocky to say I'm going to share wisdom. How about that? I'll just say I'll share my experiences, and you can choose to decide whether it is or isn't wise. Mm-hmm. But I will just say, and I didn't invent this. I learned it from Paul Dipple, and I didn't learn it the first time he told me, or the second time, or when Brian O'Connell told me as well. But about the third or fourth time Paul said it, it finally sunk in. And that is this: choose a lane. Decide what your target client profile is, and then be as rifle focused as you can on going after that type of client and not listening to the noise of other types of clients that raise their hands or potential clients. If you will do that, I think you will find you will grow faster, you will grow more profitably, and you'll sleep better at night.
No, I agree with you. And that's one of the reasons that I always hated the business model where a print dealer brings in an IT company and then its marketing is through a print sales force. That brings you all kinds of noise and nonsense. It's just crazy. It should be the other way around, and that's one of the things that I'm excited about when I'm watching Xerox do this with their IT savvy. It's because it's a reverse integration. But it should be the IT people looking at the base. They can mine those customers themselves. They don't need the print people getting in the middle of it. Look for the right customer profile and go out there and sell them. Milton, it's fantastic. I'm super excited for you. And like I said, I can't wait to come to the beach and see the mansion you're going to build down there. And I love that smile on your face. And folks, I hope you paid attention to today's episode. Reach out to Milton. A lot of you know him. He's a great guy. He'll talk to you. This is a good opportunity for Milton. It's a good opportunity for the folks at ImageQuest still. They're not going anywhere. They're still going to grow and prosper. And it's a win for everybody. And it's a win for me to be able to know you. And ladies and gentlemen, everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all of the invented. Don't get stuck there, and I'll see you all on